Some critics say the battles over the former president's ballot status are turning him into a martyr and eroding faith in American elections. As the top elections official in Washington state, Steve Hobbs says he is troubled by the threat former President Donald J. Trump poses to democracy and fears the prospect of his return to power. But he also worries that recent decisions in Maine and Colorado to bar Mr. Trump from presidential primary ballots there could backfire, further eroding Americans' fraying faith in U.S. elections. Removing him from the ballot would, on its face value, seem very anti-democratic, said Mr. Hobbs, a Democrat who is in his first term as Secretary of State. Then he added a critical caveat, but so is trying to overthrow your country. Mr. Hobbs's misgivings reflect deep divisions and unease among elected officials, democracy experts, and voters over how to handle Mr. Trump's campaign to reclaim the presidency 4 years after he went to extraordinary lengths in an attempt to overturn the 2020 election. While some, like Mr. Hobbs, think it best that voters settle the matter, others say that Mr. Trump's efforts require accountability and should be legally disqualifying. Challenges to Mr. Trump's candidacy have been filed in at least 32 states, though many of those challenges have gained little or no traction, and some have languished on court dockets for months. The decisions happening right now come amid a collapse of faith in the American electoral system, said Nate Persily, a Stanford Law School professor who specializes in election law and democracy. We are walking in new constitutional snow here to try and figure out how to deal with these unprecedented developments, he said. Professor Persily and other legal experts said they expected the United States Supreme Court would ultimately overturn the decisions in Colorado and Maine to keep Mr. Trump on the ballot, perhaps sidestepping the question of whether Mr. Trump engaged in an insurrection. Mr. Persily is hopeful that whatever ruling the court issues will bring clarity, and soon. This is not a political and electoral system that can deal with ambiguity right now, he said. Mr. Trump and his supporters have called the disqualifications in Maine and Colorado partisan ploys that robbed voters of their right to choose candidates. They accused Democrats of hypocrisy for trying to bar Mr. Trump from the ballot after campaigning in the past 2 elections as champions of democracy. After the Colorado Supreme Court ruled that Mr. Trump should be removed from the state's primary ballot, Senator J.D. Vance, Republican of Ohio, said in a statement, "Apparently democracy is when judges tell people they're not allowed to vote for the candidate leading in the polls? This is disgraceful. The Supreme Court must take the case and end this assault on American voters." Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey and Mr. Trump's most ardent critic in the Republican primary, warned that Maine's decision would turn Mr. Trump into a martyr. But other prominent critics of Mr. Trump, many of them anti-Trump Republicans, said the threat he posed to democracy and his actions surrounding the January 6 attack on the Capitol now required an extraordinary intervention, whatever the electoral consequences. The challenges are based on a Reconstruction-era provision of the 14th Amendment that prohibits anyone who has engaged in rebellion or insurrection from holding federal or state office. Judge hailed Colorado and Maine's decisions as unassailable interpretations of the Constitution. Officials in Maine and Colorado who disqualified Mr. Trump from the ballot have written that their decision stemmed from following the language of the Constitution. But on a recent sunny Friday afternoon in the Echo Park neighborhood of Los Angeles, Dina Drewis, 37, a copywriter, and Aaron Begaley, 43, a contractor, both of whom have consistently voted for Democrats, expressed a queasy ambivalence over such an extraordinary step. "I'm really just conflicted," Mr. Begaley said. "It's hard to imagine he didn't fully engage in insurrection. Everything points to it. But the other half of the country is in a position where they feel like it should be up to the electorate.